So I'm really delighted to introduce you to Steve Thorpe from the British Geological Survey, who's going to give us an example of how this can and is being operationalized over in the UK.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. It's truly fantastic to be in such a lineup with so much amazing science and research being done. So I'm hoping that we can show that BGS are kind of contributing to lots of very similar projects within the UK. My only regret is that BGS management wouldn't pay for me to actually come out and deliver my 15 minutes, but never mind. So my name's Steve Thorpe. I am a geospatial technician at the BGS. So essentially that means that I spend my days working on transforming data from 2D to 3D, occasionally 4D, and essentially working with lots of different file formats. But importantly for this talk, I'm heavily involved in the management of our spatial data sets. So I thought I'd kick off with my first introductory slide with a view of our borehole data set. So the data set on screen shows almost 1.4 million borehole records, which we currently have within our borehole database. Each of these borehole records has various pieces of metadata attached, such as the location, the depth, the downhole geology, and the kind of who, when, and why. And you can see from the map that it's pretty much the whole country is peppered with boreholes, so you may be wondering what we're doing to progress our collection. And hopefully some of these questions will be answered in my presentation. So here's an overview of what I'm hoping to present today. So I'm going to start with looking at the data and the kind of usages that we have at BGS, and then going to look at some of the collaborations and how we're making data more accessible, a couple of examples of why data is key, and then move on to describing what we collect as well as just the rocks, and then just leave you with some final thoughts. So first up, the data. We have a huge collection of data sets here at BGS, so I'm just going to show you a few on the screen. So we have the kind of physical collection of our drill core, which has been collected over the last 150 odd years, something like that, held in our National Geological Repository at our headquarters in the UK. As I've already mentioned, we have 1.4 million records of borehole records, should I say. So they can be, they are held as paper records, or the majority of those are held as paper records, which takes up currently around 15 kilometers of shelf space. All of our data is naturally held in databases. So this, for example, is a front end to one of those databases where our users can search for boreholes, and they can use the information contained in the downhole logs to create a digital record, which can then be used in things like 3D modeling, which I'm just going to describe in the next slide. The biggest advantage that we've got at the BGS was in terms of standardizations of our products. So all of our maps, all of our models and boreholes follow a national standard of naming, so a national naming convention, and that is all contained within a series of dictionaries. So I've got an example here from our lexicon, which is the named rock units, the named rock units. This is kind of a vital step that we've done within the BGS, and lots of geological surveys are kind of following that pattern, following our example. Finally, we have kind of delivery of that data in a number of different ways. This is the top picture there is just showing a desktop GIS. The key is that all of our staff have access to all of the BGS data via the desktop. Which can help them kind of provide the advice, guidance and research described by our business model and our kind of strategy. So one of the uses that I'm involved with at BGS is generating 3D geological models. So the process essentially takes all of our kind of standardized data, all of our spatial data, so things like the map and the DTM, for example, the digital terrain model. Sorry, shouldn't use acronyms. We combine it with our downhole information to generate a series of cross sections, which are drawn by our geologists or our 3D modelers. Lots of those sections are then kind of strung together to create this fence diagram, and from the fence diagram, the software generates a block model. And then the key thing is that from that block model, we can generate outputs depending on clients' needs or stakeholders' needs. BGS has been creating these 3D models for around about 20 years. So in 2004, we began collecting all the information into yet more databases. This database not only contains information on spatial location, but also the content and evolution of each model, and like who produced it in the first place. So it provides a full, transparent history of each model, and also stores the QA processes applied to the model. This map shows the progress to date. Each of these models, as you might imagine, has different scales, it has different purposes, and even has different geology. So it's important to control those and ensure that that kind of information is easily communicated to everybody that's using that data. A bit about collaboration. So in the last 5 years, we've been engaging much more with our stakeholders than we ever have before, partly through pushes from central government, but also through things like the Open Government License, for example, but also partly through a will to connect and encourage the use of BGS data more freely and more openly. In 2016, we began a 2-year project with a company called Kinetics, which is a British company that made big waves in the US as well. And Kinetics have developed the Hole-based site investigation system, which is a really intelligent borehole management tool. And it has the ability to also map in 2D and kind of draw cross-sections in a very implicit way. Hole-based is a joint market leader in the UK for this type of software. Many UK companies use it, and it was therefore seen as a good idea to try and embed BGS data within the Hole-based system and provide better links during the design and construction phase. And the outcome of that 2-year project was essentially a plugin for the Hole-based system that allows users to connect with our borehole web mapping services, but importantly allows them to share their data back with the BGS and easily from within the software. So moving on slightly, a few years later, we have our most recent project, is the Dig2Share project, which is a partnership with, between BGS, Atkins, and Morgan Sindall. The aim was to try and encourage industry to share more data and to unlock 10,000 boreholes within the 1-year lifespan of the project, which I'm pleased to see that we have almost managed that. We're about 1,000 short, so we're very close to achieving that goal. And we began this project, interestingly, with a behavioural study on why people no longer submit their data to the BGS as readily as they used to, which is actually quite a fascinating journey for me to take, and it's teaching me an awful lot about the industry in general. We've also developed some tools and some various web portals in order to make data sharing much easier and simpler. And we've also set up a user community to engage and create a group with the same ethos to promote sharing of data for the good of the UK, for industry, and for the economy as a whole, instead of just the individual. This slide just demonstrates what the Kinetics plugin does. So within the Kinetics environment, you can display your site investigation data, which is the points in blue, together with the BGS geology maps. So we've got 2 layers of maps in the background there, the different colours that you can see, and then also the point data from our web mapping service, which is the borehole points from our web mapping service. So we have one plugin which allows users to kind of order information from the BGS, but the key one for us is to download from BGS and to submit their data to the BGS. Ideally, we prefer that in AGS format. So I believe the AGS format is very similar to your DIGS format. It's a very simple text file kind of format, which allows easy interoperation between different softwares. So moving on, why data is key. It's no real surprise to say that more data equals better understanding. And never is this more pertinent than in the subsurface, where nothing can be seen until you dig it or if you poke holes in it, that kind of thing. And even then, we can only assume some form of continuity, which may not actually be true. Knowledge of geological processes, of history, of evolution, all play a huge part in producing a fuller, but not totally accurate picture of the ground. This slide shows an example of a phenomenon called a buried valley. Buried valleys are a major research area within the BGS due to the glacial history of the UK and the importance of water movement. Buried valleys essentially act like motorways to water, as they are generally composed of sand and gravel. Importantly, they are usually invisible at the surface, and therefore they're mapped very poorly. Borehole data and 3D modelling overcome this problem, so a detailed study, such as the one that you can see on the screen, can considerably reduce the uncertainty and can reveal the true complexity of features like buried valleys. The impact of our borehole data collection is increased when it's combined with other data sets and techniques like 3D modelling and 3D visualization. When combined with other spatial data, it becomes a powerful communication tool to understand the subsurface. The borehole models can be used in a very applied way to answer specific questions or hypotheses. Integrated models combining geology, boreholes, buildings and BIM models, for example, and topography can become very powerful when used to communicate the big science questions like water availability, the storage of carbon dioxide, for example, development, smart city infrastructure, the kind of things that Josh was just talking about in his previous slide about underground utilities and building an asset register. These things are all vitally important. And just a few kind of shots to show that the information that we store is not just about the rocks. This first one is to kind of improve tunneling and infrastructure design. So this again goes back to kind of reducing risk and reducing uncertainty. Also equates to saving a little bit of money, but obviously that's not the primary goal. We've done some work on the urban heat islands, so understanding the transfer of heat between basements. So we had some work at Cambridge University, which looked into the kind of process of transferring this heat and the effect of geology on that transfer process. Studies like the stuff that's been done in Helsinki, so understanding the underground and planning the underground, which is missing in most local authority plans or even major government plans. And Helsinki is really leading the way. And I was out there about a month ago, and it's a really fascinating place to be. And to talk to the planners is quite amazing, an amazing journey. As Josh was just talking about, a national register of underground assets. So in fact, he mentioned the work being done by the Geospatial Commission here in the UK in the northeast, collecting all that information together, coming up with standardisation routines and standardised data formats is incredibly difficult, and the Geospatial Commission is really helping to kind of bring all that data together and make it part of the major research project. Unfortunately, I couldn't find examples of the project in the northeast, so I've used this one of Rotterdam, but you get the idea. And this is a project by one of our companies in the UK, not far from where we're located in the UK, where we built a geological 3D model, which is shown. You can see all the colours in the background, and we then combined it with a series of CAD documents, CAD format models, should I say. So you can see the piles, for example, going. That's the green infrastructure, being combined with the geological model and the properties from that geological model being used to design those piles in the first place. So I'll just finish with a few take-home messages. So the obvious one is that metadata is vital to future-proofing all of our models and all of our standard processes, essentially all of our data that we're collecting. Establishing delivery of data brings maximum benefit. So in terms of saving lives from strikes and things like that. In terms of saving money and reducing the risk on infrastructure projects, several different benefits. Geology is not just about the rocks, so we are putting more effort into the kind of properties and behaviours of the rocks, particularly within the UK. So we have several projects that are feeding that kind of data into, again, particularly infrastructure projects, rail and road building projects. And then continued collaboration and engagement with our stakeholders leads to savings in time, effort and resources. That was kind of short and sharp deliveries, but hopefully that's kind of got across the message that the BGS wants to portray. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. So we have time for one quick question from our audience, which was, in terms of the stakeholder engagement that you did, what did you see in terms of what was discouraging people from contributing their boreholes?
Well, okay, that's a really interesting question. So it was kind of threefold, really. The key one that always comes out now is like data liability. So who owns the data? Where do we sit when something either goes wrong, or if people want to use the data that we've got held in our database, for example, where's the liability if that data is incorrect when a site investigation takes place? So yeah, permissions and liability, and it's all quite a sticky kind of sticky question, to be honest, and it does come up every single time we do any kind of dig to share, or please send us our data presentation. These kind of questions come up. The way we've got around that is to kind of, or hopefully, explain to people that they need to be writing into their contracts from essentially from this moment onwards, who owns the data, and whether they are happy for that data to be shared. So whether it's the clients writing this contract and telling their contractors to share the data or allow the data to be shared, or if it's from the bottom upwards, so talking to the site investigation contractors and telling their clients to be sharing that data with the BGS. There's kind of two ways to look at that. Some people are quite keen on keeping hold of their competitive advantage, if you like, but we're slowly making inroads, I think, by talking to the big companies and kind of feeding that from the top down.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.